Great. Okay, so I think we're ready to make a start. So yeah, as I said, welcome everyone. Welcome to this latest in our webinar series, where today we're going to be workshopping some AI examples, practical examples within the contact center, and looking at the benefit and the impact that can make within a typical contact center. So after some intros, we're going to be talking about AI. Why does it matter? We're hearing a lot about it, wherever we turn at the moment. And we're going to look at an example of where it's been done brilliantly before in business as well. We're then going to talk about the AI-powered contact center. What does that mean, and how can it really start to sort of turn the dials for us in the way that we service our clients? We're then going to give you a quick intro to IPI Cloud AI. I promise this is not a full-blown sales presentation at all, because we're then going to very quickly go into workshopping the typical contact center. So for the purposes of today, what we've done is pre-looked at the number of attendees that we've got, and also the size of the contact centers which you're all running. And we've averaged out to around about 200 agents. So for our worked business case examples, we're going to be using that 200 agent or 200 seat example. So maybe get a piece of pen and paper at the ready, and you can start working through some of the metrics with us as we start to look at three typical processes where AI can be injected in, and look at some of the efficiencies and returns that can drive. We'll then have a summary of that business case, and we'll finish with some Q&A and close. So on the webinar today, I'm going to be doing a fair bit of talking. I'm Steve Murray. For those of you who haven't joined one of our webinars before, I'm Applications Director at IPI, and I am privileged to run the teams who are responsible for innovation, design, and delivery of our AI, self-service, and compliance technologies here at IPI. And with me, I'm joined by Ben.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Smith. So I'm a solutions consultant here at IPI, really working with our clients to identify areas of opportunity, designing solutions through implementation, and then sort of post-delivery, post-back as well. So yeah, I'll be talking through some of the examples as we go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. So a little bit of a sort of a quick précis, I suppose. What is AI and why does it matter? So the two gentlemen you see in the photo here, Minsky and McCarthy, they were two professors, and if you like, the kind of fathers of modern AI. They worked over in MIT in Boston during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And their definition of AI was any task performed by a machine that would have previously been considered to require human intelligence. Now that's quite a broad blanket term, but it makes sense. But as we sit here in 2021, we've essentially able to sort of categorize that into a few more buckets. Four processes or four stages of AI. It started with reactive machines and moved into what we refer to as limited memory, and that's sort of where we're at today. The ability to interact with a machine, with a piece of AI, for that machine to take some data and perhaps make some recommendations, but again, very much sort of ultimately sort of trained by humans. In the future, where we're looking to get to is sort of stage 3 and stage 4, which is theory of mind, and then ultimately self-awareness. Self-awareness being the kind of potentially scary stuff you might have seen if you've ever watched The Matrix or Terminator. But for me, the next stage we're looking to enter is stage 3, which is theory of mind, and that's very exciting. And that's where AI has an awareness of human emotion. So maybe you're in your car, you've got directions to somewhere, you're driving, the traffic's bad, you're going to be late, you start getting a bit agitated with a virtual assistant in your car. And that virtual assistant understands that emotion and can perhaps provide an option to make a call to somebody to let them know you're going to be late. So for me, that's we're not there yet, but that's the next exciting stage in AI development. But as we sit here today, AI surrounds us. Be that the smart speakers that we're engaging with on a daily basis to control our heating or tell us what our calendars are looking like or what the weather's doing. The appliances which look like they're straight off the Death Star, but to do automate the the vacuuming of our houses or to do our washing. And of course, to autonomous vehicles. So anyone who's been lucky enough to own or to have a ride in a Tesla and seen the autopilot function, incredible to think that this vehicle is in real time mapping tens of thousands of data points to ensure it keeps us in the right lane at the right speed and is aware of potential, collision hazards. And lastly, I suppose, and very relevant for the last 12 months, the idea of being able to use AI and the algorithms within it to do virology modeling, predict the spread of a pandemic, and then also help in protein modeling for the development of the vaccines, which are going to help to bring us out of this on the other side. So where's it been done well in a business sense then? That's the background and the theory of it, but who's done it really well in the business world? So we're going to play a quick game here of guess the company. So I'm going to give you some clues. Do feel free in the chat bar within GoToWebinar to fire some guesses in, and we'll see if we can if between us we can get to the bottom of who this is before I reveal the answer at the end. So Ben, if you want to have a check and see what suggestions we get through.
Yep.
So this organization, it's a global company, but headquartered over in the US. They had a very ambitious CEO who took the helm in 2010 and really needed to take them through a serious business transformation process. And they converted them into really a software and data business. And through that, they are driving these incredible personalized experiences driven by AI. And the impact has been fairly dramatic. So, if I had a crystal ball and I'd invested £5,000 in stock in 2011, I'd be sat on about £130,000 today. Sadly, I don't have a crystal ball and I never invested in their stock, but yeah, nevertheless, the story's still impressive. So I'm just wondering, Ben, have we had any guesses through as to who this organization could be from anyone?
Amazon is in there.
Yeah. Good guesses. Good guesses.
Apple.
Good guesses all. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of the tech giants, as we might expect. So the answer is actually Domino's Pizza. So Patrick Doyle, the CEO there, realized that to transform the business, he needed to apply emerging technologies to really turn the dial. And as you've seen there, in terms of percentage stock increase, an investor's dream, outstripping the likes of Google and Facebook. So, how did they do it? Well, firstly, they listened to the voice of the customer, and a decade ago, Domino's had a terrible reputation for producing really bad pizza. So they listened to the voice of the customer and understood what needed to change. They really became an organization of huge investment into data scientists, developers, and analysts, because really what they're doing now is software-powered pizza. So the technology that they've embedded within their processes now allows that AI to drive these frictionless customer experiences. So things like zero touch ordering, they were the first to introduce that because they know that 85% of their customers will order the same thing every time. So the idea of being able to just open an app, we know and have an understanding already of what that customer is going to order. And if you don't press cancel within 5 seconds, it'll place the order and it will deliver to your usual address. But they continue to innovate and understand that they have to innovate to move forward. So they delivered the first pizza by drone in New Zealand earlier this year, and since 2017 have been researching autonomous delivery vehicles for the road as well. So the increase in their valuation as a business really sort of speaks for itself in terms of how well they have delivered that AI into their business processes. So how do we relate that then to the contact center? So I suppose it's consumer technology and demand often drives that. The contact center and business sometimes lags behind. But the reality is contact centers cannot do that anymore. There's huge opportunity available through change. And the analysts are telling us that by 2022, nearly 3/4 of all interactions are going to involve some kind of AI involved in the process. Critically, the technologies which are leading the Gartner hype cycle in the recent future are all AI-driven capability. So virtual customer assistants, chatbots, and customer engagement hubs. So this is, again, machine learning to take that data, personalization of data, and then feed it multi-channel into customers to allow them to engage with us in the way of their choosing. And these are the things which are really going to turn the dial for our ability to serve our customers as we move forwards. And IDC tell us that actually organizations who do this really well and that drive and push this AI capability into their processes are going to be able to achieve a far higher customer satisfaction score than that of their competition. So we really are on the cusp here, with AI being poised to absolutely transform the way that we serve and engage with our customers and the way that they interact with us. There is huge opportunity for driving improvements in efficiency within contact centers, reducing cost, and just making the customer experience far, far greater. So we're going to talk a little bit now about IPI Cloud AI and really our vision for AI within the contact center. And I suppose our desire here at IPI is to make the ability to adopt AI ubiquitous for any contact center that wants to do so. So essentially, the best way to think about IPI Cloud AI is like a UFO that we can fly in front of any contact center that's there today. And that could be a legacy, aging on-premise, telephony solution. It could be the latest, CCaaS vendors solution that might be there. And what we're able to do is seamlessly inject AI and machine learning capability from the world's top vendors like Google, like Amazon, and team that with applications, self-service applications that we've developed and successfully rolled out to thousands and thousands of agent seats across the world previously, to drive these fantastic AI-powered customer journeys and customer experiences. So in practical terms, what are the key benefits of doing that? Well, this is a 100% SaaS model. Like I said, take the UFO analogy, we fly it in. There's no equipment required on site. It means it's evergreen. There's no need for you to continuously be upgrading licensing or capability. It's truly burstable to meet peaks in demand as well. So this is a usage-based solution. You push through as much traffic or as little traffic as you want. Because of that low IT involvement, it's therefore very easy to spin up proof of concepts. So we can help you define those processes which are ripe for automation and AI, look to see if they work, and if they do, bring them into production very, very quickly. And as I said, this is about injecting sort of next generation AI into both legacy platforms, but if you have a new platform, a new one as well. Ultimately, we're going to increase your capacity, reduce cost, and again, drive that customer experience forwards. So enough talking about that sort of specifics of sort of product. Let's actually look at some workshop examples now. So this is the point where it's sort of pen and paper, and let's help you sort of create the vision of what this could look like. So as I said, we have our typical contact center. So our typical contact center, we have about 200 agents working, and those agents are taking about 7,000 calls per day. So not a crazy busy contact center, about 35 calls per agent per day. So not super high volume, but again, not instantly transactional type stuff either. And our contact center is probably very similar to a lot of the people attending today. We have customers calling in. We're hitting a DTMF menu, so a touch tone menu at the front end. And customers will then choose where they want to go. That might be into a service group or a sales group. Our agents here are multi-skilled, as a lot of contact centers now are. And behind that, we've got a heap of processes that the agents have to deal with, from complaints to renewals, new sales, quotes, and then just kind of routine noise as well that every contact center has to deal with. So I imagine that's looking, although it fairly simplified in diagrammatical form, it's looking fairly similar to what a lot of people experience on this call. So right at the front end, what can we do to start driving some efficiency, into that environment? So we've bought in, as you can see here, IPI Cloud AI, and IPI Cloud AI is now sat in front of the contact center, and we're going to start capturing customer intent before they've made any decisions about what they think they want to do, where they want to go, within that DTMF IVR menu. We're essentially going to be removing that from the process. So by having a conversational interface that exists with the customer, we can ask them, why are they calling? What's the purpose for the call? And we can start to make some decisions based on that immediately before they've even spoken to anyone. We may decide that we want to automate that call. The caller may be a mundane, repeatable inquiry that's low value to the contact center, and not particularly important that the caller engages with a human to deal with it. So we might push them off into an automation layer where we can perhaps provide them some data, maybe an account balance or routine query, and take that traffic away from the agent. However, we might capture from their intent, and actually this is a complaint. So this is a motive, it's complex, and we really know that we need to get that through to an agent, within the service organization to try and retain that customer. So we can essentially make those routing decisions right up front, before we've even come anywhere near an agent, and remove that DTMF menu, which is often so constrictive in terms of understanding, a customer's wants and needs. So, what's the impact of that? The simple act of just capturing that intent can really offer some significant efficiencies. So if we look at the metrics we were using before, so with a total of 7,000 calls, we can reduce average handle time based on identifying reason per call. And we found that around about 12 seconds can be taken away, with the agent provided the reason for the call via a screen pop. We can take around 12 seconds away using that intent capture. Now, once you start to extrapolate that up across 7,000 calls a day, that small portion of 12 seconds suddenly looks like 23.3 hours of capacity. The second layer to that, of course, is if we look at the way those constrained DTMF menus often drive customers into the wrong department or the wrong environment, we can reduce internal transfers as well. Now, for argument's sake, our contact centers, set up pretty well. We're only getting 10% internal call transfers, but even 10% of those 7,000 calls is 700. And when you look at the time it takes to deal with an internal transfer, if you look at the identifying the reason for the call, plus then even a cold transfer into the relevant queue, you're looking at about 20 seconds per call. So again, just by taking out that 10%, we've then got 3.8 hours of efficiency driven on top. So, in summary, what's the daily saving? Well, it's the equivalent of 6.7 FTE that are there in terms of their productive talk time, or 27.1 hours. If we wrap that up, an annual saving is then realized of £167,500 just through capturing that customer intent up front. So I'm going to hand over to Ben now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the next stage down. So once we've captured that intent, understanding who that customer is.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So moving, taking our typical contact center, and everybody on the call will know generally the first thing that happens when we get through to an agent is that we run through this IDMe process. So an agent may ask, can I take your account number, for example, or first line of address, postcode, name, email address, whatever it is, whatever fields we're using of data to identify. The fact of the matter is that this process typically takes 38 seconds. That's quite a conservative figure. We've seen some clients 45 up to a minute, but on average it's a 38-second process of just purely, what's your name, where do you come from, and then how can I help? Let's get on with the query and servicing this request. So we know voice is still the preferred channel of choice, and people do want to contact via voice to get their query resolved or to complete an action. But generally, it's not a very slick process, and there is always that element of risk of fraud as well. most of us probably would have seen some of these social engineering sort of hacks, if you like, with the baby crying in the background, and I don't have that to hand, but can I just get on, get on. So there is always that risk as well. So we're going to talk a bit about the sort of application that we've developed here at IPI, and that's called IDMe. And this application is really enables us to identify callers before they actually get through connected to an agent. And we can do this through a number of different ways. We can do this through reading the CLI, the number calling. Is this a number that we know? We can do it through a sort of a voice user interface, or we can even inject our voice biometrics module into this as well. So the typical "my voice is my password." It's it's a 5-second process to identify who we are. What we can also do once we know who's calling and the reason for the call, we can then layer on some additional intelligence, some routing decisions, some routing intelligence. So in sort of an example could be Mr. Jones. I won't use Mr. Smith because Mr. Jones is calling up, and we know Mr. Jones is nearing the end of his sort of contract with us. It's probably a renewals query. So let's get that call straight through to a renewals team. It could be that Mr. Jones owes a payment, so let's get that call straight through to a collections team. We can flip it as well, so it could be that we know Mr. Jones has a history of spending a lot of money. He has a higher spending pattern, so actually let's get that call straight through to a sales team. But once we have the ability to sort of pre-authorize customers and pre-identify customers and pass that information to an agent, that means the conversation, instead of running through that initial 38-second process, we can get straight on to the reason for the call, straight on to the query. Now we're going to talk about some of the numbers here, and again, to Steve's point about sort of pen and paper at the ready. So we've got a table up of various sort of different sort of quantities of calls where this could apply, for example, based on the size of a contact center. But even if just 100 calls a day, 38 seconds, when we sort of extrapolate the numbers up and we multiply that up, that's over an hour every day of just, what's your name, where'd you come from? Now let's get on with the query. Multiply that up to sort of time per month. It's an enormous amount of time spent doing this, and it's just so often overlooked. So that's why it's really, really powerful. It's such a low-hanging fruit here for sort of releasing capacity. As we run through, you can see the numbers just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I would say to anybody on the call, we have a rough idea really where this may be applicable in your own organisations. Looking at the 7,000 calls that we're sort of running through as a typical, based on the average size of contact centre people that are on the webinar today, you can see it's nearly 74 hours a day of just what's your name, where'd you come from before these queries start. So it's an enormous potential FTE saving or capacity to be released, however you want to sort of realise the benefit of this. We run it up to 10,000. We know there's going to be organisations out there with with taking greater number of calls where this is applicable. But really, the sort of the message to sort of hit home is that there is an enormous amount of time sort of spent and wasted. There's no value being added just running through this process. So once we are able to identify a caller, the next sort of layer that we can apply here is then, well, could we offer the option for callers to automate this process, to actually maybe switch to digital and complete this service themselves, so offering some self-service. Now, the majority of the population in the UK own a smartphone, and based on the sort of demographic and the age brackets that people fall into, it's sort of the appetite, I suppose, to converse with a bot, or just to sort of happy to deal with this sort of switch. But what is important to sort of take away is that across all age groups, nearly 60% of consumers, of callers, really value the ability to just have their query or complete their action at the first attempt of asking. So that is, that is key. It's that first contact resolution. So how do we do this? So how can we offer this? And it's an application that we call SendMe, and it's essentially an application that enables callers or consumers to actually switch to digital. And this means that we are able to offer that self-service option. We can do this in a number of ways. It could be, for example, we have customers where when we know somebody is calling from a mobile, the CLI presents as 07, excuse me, actually we can offer the ability to complete this journey online. So we can send out a text with a link to go and complete that journey. It could be, we've got clients, insurance clients, where they know, we have callers that are just calling for proof of their no claims discount. So we understand that's why somebody's calling, and we can identify who that caller is. Well, we don't need to have that conversation completed by an agent. So actually we can just automate that process. And the same can be said the other way around. If we've got maybe a new customer that needs to provide proof of no claims, we can actually offer the ability to switch to digital and complete that without the need to speak to an agent. We can do that with a DTMF menu, or we can do that with a voice user interface. But crucially, if we can then switch to digital, then that opens up the world of chatbots. And of course, it wouldn't be an AI webinar if we weren't talking about chatbots. So Steve, I'll hand over to you for chatbots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so obviously, as Ben was saying, it wouldn't be AI without chatbots. So, but chatbots now are so much more than just what they've historically been sort of set up to do, which is that sort of search and sort of beefed up frequently asked questions. What we're now able to do is drive really conversational dialogues with very powerful natural language processing, and we can do that full journey end to end now. Everything from completing a sales quotation, a claim, handling the complaints process, with deep integrations now into the relevant CRM or policy administration systems. And again, where we can drive even more value is essentially putting the chatbot in the loop as well with the human. So actually, let's take the sales journey, for example. There might be a part of that process where there is some very mundane parts of that, where there's multiple choice for the type of product the customer wants, the customer's interested in. We might want to take all of that using the chatbot up front, but then if we know that we achieve a better conversion rate with a human agent at the end of that process, we might want to do a warm transfer in to the human agent at the relevant point, with a full transcript of obviously an understanding of the customer's previous engagement with the chatbot, so the human agent can then close the sale and convert the customer. So we achieve typically 94+% pattern recognition now with the chatbot, so containment rates are very, very high. And we see anything from 20 to 50% in terms of the ability to sort of deflect those contact rates, once a chatbot's been deployed within an environment. And interestingly, customers are just far more likely to engage with a chatbot that offers a proactive engagement method than just a static web form as well. So again, what's the impact? What's the impact of switching to digital? What can that look like from a capacity perspective? Well, again, if we look at, as familiar to you by now, our 7,000 call model in our 200 agent contact center, let's go really conservative here, and let's go even lower than we normally see. And let's say we're only going to be able to deflect 10% of calls out to digital channels. So we've got a bucket of 700 calls to play with here. So 700 contacts per day. Our contact center is not the most expensive. It's not sort of high-end financial services type stuff, but nor is it, transactional sort of lower end. We've got a £3.50 agent-led cost per contact. That is versus the digital cost per contact of around about 20 pence. So just by removing 10% of that traffic, we've already got a capacity of £2,300 saved each day. And of course, extrapolating that up, and suddenly those numbers start to look really quite impressive, with 250,000 contacts per annum, taken out and pushed into digital channels, and a saving of over £800,000 per annum. So, again, this is based on a fully loaded agent cost of £25,000 per annum. So that includes salary plus some NI and PAYE contributions. So yeah, in excess of £800,000 saved. So if we then sort of summarize the sort of threads of the different business cases for those different processes, what does it look like in total? What's the sort of bucket of opportunity at our contact center today? Well, as we said, intent capture, we've got that capacity release of around 6.7 FTE and nearly £170,000. With IDMe, again, the numbers extrapolate up and get even larger, 18.5 FTE, with knocking on the door of 500,000 of savings. And by switching to digital, again, we can remove those 252,000 contacts per annum, achieving that £800,000 plus saving. Ultimately, just those three simple processes are releasing around 1.5 million of benefit, financial benefit for our contact center in year one. So I suppose my question to everybody attending the call today is, what would you be able to do with 1.5 million of increased capacity, within your own contact center? I certainly have a few ideas, it's fair to say. So Ben, I think there were some other sort of softer considerations you wanted to cover as well.
Yeah, so these are sort of areas that are maybe initially a little bit harder to quantify in sort of the hard metrics that we've run through as typical examples, but generally these are softer benefits that we see over a period of time post implementation of these types of technologies. So first and foremost, introducing these technologies, it makes agent lives better. It makes their working day easier. So we will typically see a reduction in staff attrition and an increase in employee satisfaction. There's an example that we can talk to, a project that I was involved with where we were using our in-call queueback application. I know we haven't talked about it on the session today, just for sort of for time's sake, but sort of pre-project, there was agents complaining that the first sort of minute, 2 minutes, customers were complaining about how long they'd spent on hold, and actually sort of the agent was trying to calm that sort of customer down before starting. We implemented a callback technology, and after that had gone in, actually that sort of initial minute, 2 minutes of sort of chewing an agent's ear just went away. It just disappeared. So that's definitely a metric that we see improve. Obviously, there'll be an increase in the NPS score as well, making it easier to transact with organisations and generally improving that overall experience of engaging with organisations. We talked about the IDMe element and sort of reducing that compliance risk. So sort of outsourcing, like some of the PCI solutions that we've delivered, it's outsourcing that risk and ensuring a greater level of IDMe, and that also leads to sort of a reduction in training requirements, because internal systems don't need to be changed so often. Excuse me. We can sweat those assets for a much longer period of time. Actually, there's a drastic reduction in sort of training requirements. We don't need to get people up to speed with new systems, new processes, for example. It's just taken care of. So these are other areas that we definitely we would expect to see improve.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. So Q&A, we've had a couple come in already, but do feel free to add your questions into the question bar for us, and we'll have a look through at some of them. So we've had one come in. So what is the smallest number of agents these applications could work with? Ben, if you want to handle that one?
Yeah, well, the sort of easy answer is there is no sort of real minimum. So it's a business, it's a case by case business sort of basis that we'd sort of run the exercise of the workshopping and understanding the potential for opportunity. As Steve mentioned, very early on, it's easy for us to spin up proof of concepts and move into production systems. So there isn't really a minimum for this. So certainly if there's an interest, we could run through that. It'd be interesting to understand actually how many agents the person who sort of asked that questions has in their organisation. We could run that through, and actually anybody else on the call, if they could drop that into the chat as we've gone through, that'd be interesting.
Thanks, Ben. So yeah, another question was: is any chance integration to our CRM system required for capturing intent? So so I'll pick that one up. No, in essence, there is not necessarily CRM integration required for intent capture. There is certainly a requirement for us to help build out and understand the intent categorizations that we need to be listening out for, and then we can decide how and where we route those to. Obviously, if we can then, on the next layer, certainly for identification and verification, for example, we do need to deliver that CRM integration. But to realize the benefit of intent capture, there doesn't necessarily have to be that CRM integration up front, which again means that these things can be spun up very quickly, very rapidly, and start to drive some of that time and efficiency benefit very, very quickly without it turning into a massively complex IT project. As the one thing that certainly we always find in our world is that customers development teams are always hugely busy with a very long roadmap of stuff which is already in the queue, as it were.
How do we see the contact center evolving over the next few years? Well, we could talk to the end of certainly the technologies that we've spoken about today are going to be more and more commonplace. Businesses are evolving to keep up, for sure. I think it's going to be a better experience for consumers, for customers. That will be driven by that. Steve, any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the key themes that I'm seeing at the moment, based on not only what the analysts are saying, but what the conversations we're having with our customers day in, day out, is really around the adoption of AI within those environments and how it can drive that benefit. Obviously we would say that. Personalization as well is another massive theme. So again, how do companies ethically use the masses of data they have around their customers to drive sort of hyper personalization, improved service, improved understanding of the customer and the journey that they go through the business. And then I think insight and analytics, again, always playing a key role in the contact center. There's more and more data that exists through all of these disparate systems, and it's about how we bring that together to make to deliver real sort of actionable stuff off the back of that, through the use of insight and BI tools. So those are kind of the sort of key areas from a technology perspective that I'm seeing in terms of how the tech's going to be evolving and the direction of travel over the next few years.
Yeah, there's going to be a slight gap, I think, between the technology being available and then actually being integrated into a seamless journey. So, it's all very well being able to ask, why you're calling, but actually then to be able to continue that and resolve that query, rather than just, to be able to action that. So I think that's going to be quite, it's going to be quite cool how that evolves. I think that's going to be great.
Yeah, great stuff. So brilliant. Well, that brings us sort of nicely to time. Obviously, thank you all very much for attending today. I hope we found the session useful. There's going to be a recording available and issued out to all attendees. So again, if you wanted to share that with other members of the team who weren't able to attend to catch up, then please do. And as I said, we'll be getting the team to follow up with you post the webinar to look at how we can help support your own business cases as we drive AI into the contact center. So yeah, once again, many thanks for attending. Ben, thank you for your support today. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks.